Here's Cecil. He's gonna come out with us more often to have some sunshine and stuff. Well, not
Fresh
too
air.
much, some fresh air.
Well, it's fresher than it's been for there with us.
So this way, he might get a little bit warmer, or I don't know. Maybe I'll tuck him in closer. Poor little guy. He gets cold.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a whole lot in the feather department right now. Anyway, interesting thing. Apparently, when I didn't. This could have been happening for years, but I didn't notice it. But I think it's new. With YouTube, now today when I uploaded a video, they said there was a copyright detected, and the copyright holder gave permission, but they're going to be putting ads on my video. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, am I going to be paid for me having ads? But
you see, like they're warning you.
Yeah, exactly. It's
hey,
like, I don't think so. I think YouTube's going to get paid so that, or you know what I mean?
You are infringing on copyright, so this is how you go.
How's that? But anyway, I just showed a product, and I'm not even going to mention the brand name anymore because they don't need my help making money. They know how to make plenty of money on their own. And so I'm wondering, I'm going to eat this now, and I'm like, am I showing the brand name? Because I got to be careful, right? Anyway.
Really sleazy.
Okay, I'll review this first, and then I'll get eating. I'm really hungry.
Wanting to remove that part.
Yeah, I know. I just. So this is Touch the Dark, and I should have read this one first before I read the other one, but I didn't know. So my comment that I wrote inside: do all supernatural guys have huge cocks? Maybe supernatural guys like the kind of attention she offers, but I haven't known any that get off on those things. Still, it's a good read. Well, I haven't known supernatural guys, so maybe that's the thing. Anyway, but the kind of, I was reading some of the sex stuff to James, and he's like, nope. Anyway, I didn't enjoy this one as much as the other one that I reviewed. But anyway, whatever. James, go ahead and review your stuff.
All right. So we go from the ridiculous to the more ridiculous. This guy, he did a good thing in his life. He exposed what happened in the My Lai massacre in Vietnam a long time ago.
Who, the author?
Yeah, Seymour Hersh. Or as I call him after this. There's so much dirt about Kennedy and the women in Kennedy's life. I'm calling him Seymour Tush. But I actually am going to call him officially Silas Smirsh. So what does...
Anyway, can you review it to explain why you don't like the guy now?
Okay. Now, I'm going to go through this a second time. I put notes in the book where I'm going to keep track how many times he says Kennedy had an obsession about Castro. An obsession. And I'm going to be documenting how many times he says he was involved in aggression because he was satisfying his need for excitement. You know, that's why he, according to he and Bobby Kennedy, Jack and Bobby Kennedy, brought on the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was to satisfy his need for excitement. He also had to prove he was a man, you know. That's why he had to win during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Never mind that he negotiated with Khrushchev. So, see less smirch, and smirch is something like the root is smeert, and then spion. I've forgotten what the endings are. So it's kind of like a Russian, not really an acronym, but that's the way they abbreviated things. They take the beginning of something and the end of something, and they come up with a new word. Gosplan comes from, I think it's government plan.
Sorry if I splashed
So
you
the
there.
gosh comes from something like gossip envy or something like that. And then of course plan. I've forgotten what the endings are. I'll give you the grammar. Anyway.
They actually pack this container pretty full. Dolmades.
Dolmades. Oh. So so what does that mean? Spion would come from German, I suspect. That means spy. And smirt means death. Death. Can you imagine that? The CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. But with the Russians, their counterintelligence thing is death to spies. Yeah, it literally be death to spies. A bullet in the back of the head or in the neck. Poor Noam Chomsky. Like, how many spies did the Americans kill? Julius and Ethel Rosenberg? How many of the spies did the Russians kill during the Cold War? At least the second phase, since World War II. Yeah. You'll never know. But Noam Chomsky's going around saying, and incidentally, he gets a fave, if not a rave review, for one of his books. I think one published in 1993 from See Less Smirch. So, yeah, Chomsky's going around. He's really great at ethics, I'm telling you. Although he's about as good at ethics as he is at linguistics, and linguists now laugh at him. But ethics, here's his ethics. We've got to be 10 times better than our opposition. Newsflash, Chomsky. The Americans might be 1,000 times better when it comes to handling domestic people who don't get along with the government domestically. 1,000 times better. How many people did Mao kill? Was it one source I've got says 70 million. That's domestically. That's not when they're interfering with other countries and stuff like that. 70 million? Yeah. 10 times better. The Americans would have to be, they're allowed to kill 7 million domestic. This is under Mao, incidentally. This is from 1949 to 1976. So from that time period, the Americans are allowed, according to Chomsky, to kill 7 million domestic dissidents. Did they kill 7? Did they kill 70? Even if it's 70, it's off by a factor of 1 million. Chomsky, you've got no moral compass. You're an idiot, a drooling idiot. You were prematurely senile. You might be senile now if you're still surviving. But 10 times better. If you don't realize the American, we've got to be, as though they weren't there. Stupid. You stupid fools. Talking about Vietnam. Here's See Less Smirch. There was a plan being floated by a guy called Diem, who was assassinated, and his bro Nu, and maybe Nu's wife, Madame Nu, as she's still called. And I don't know if she had much to do with the plan, but she was very unpopular Vietnamese. These folks were Catholic and a Buddhist plural, where the plurality of people were Buddhist, and I think the majority were So the plan apparently was to neutralize. Oh, I don't know why they use that term, because it was really to neutralize Vietnam, opposition in Vietnam, but to make neutral South Vietnam, and there'd be a coalition government. Oh, the commies love coalition governments. That's what they had back in 1917. But you see, a coalition government, they could have, like C.Les Smersh says, oh, we get to see, he's got a source on what the agreement would have been. We get to see what might have been. Oh, you dreamer, you romantic dreamer, C.Les Smersh. C.Les, death to spies. Oh, what might have been for a few weeks or months, maybe not a few years. What the commies like doing is letting other people do the heavy lifting. They'll set up a coalition government. We're right behind you. They don't mention that it's not a pat in the back that they've got behind them, but a knife in the back. So that's what happened in 1917. They love it. Let other people do the heavy lifting. And then they stab them in the back. Quite literally. That's not figurative. Well, it might be a gun in the back of the head, or in the nape of the neck, or stuff like that. Oh, what might have been. We can see what might have been. How can we see what might have been? Yeah, they set up a coalition government. It was neutral with Prince Sihanouk in Cambodia. And then what happened? Pol Pot. See what might have been for a little while. C.Les Smersh. You stupid idiot. You published this in 1997. This is 6 years after stuff started coming out, after the fall of the Soviet Union. And 6 years after things started coming out, where things were getting released about their little secret treaties and their little secret plottings and plannings and things like that. And most important of all, of their incompetence. They couldn't win the Cold War. They couldn't win through peaceful, so-called peaceful coexistence. He's always talking about the rashness of Kennedy. But when it comes to putting nuclear arms and missiles, for delivering those arms to as far in the United States as Washington, D.C., what Khrushchev did was daring. It's rash when it's Kennedy. When it's Khrushchev, it's daring. He had to do it to protect Fidel Castro. Anyone who protects Fidel Castro is a scumbag. He had no right to do that. And he's saying, oh, it was a trade-off. Turkey,
Hey, baby.
Turkey, the Americans had troops in Turkey. Khrushchev had to have troops in Cuba. Okay. Like, had Turkey ever belonged to the commies? Whereas, they'd taken over in 1959. There's no trade-off between... You're getting this now? Are you taking notes, C.Les Smersh? There's no trade-off there. And really, the commies have no right to any place in the world. Even Russia, back in the day. China, they have no right. They have no legitimacy. They had a coup. It wasn't a revolution in 1917. I think it was weeks, but we'll say days, but we'll say weeks before they were going to have an election, because they were going to lose the election. They had no legitimacy in Russia, no legitimacy in China, no support there. Are you getting this, C.Les Smersh? Are you getting this? The people who support C.Les Smersh. Oh, the things that might have been in Vietnam. He's saying, they could have had, the Americans eventually, they would have lost in 63 instead of they losing in 73. Well, it was actually 75, but the Americans got out of Vietnam in 73. 72, I think it was. Well, we'll say it was 73. But, what's the difference? 1975 minus 1963 is 12 years. Newsflash for all you faux gauchers who've been indulging in the faux gaucherie of saying the Americans got lost in a quagmire in Vietnam. You know what? If you're fighting someone in a quagmire, it's a quagmire for them too. So, 63, all this stuff is happening. Here's something from Dean Rusk, who's the American Secretary of State, 1 year before. I don't know if Kennedy shared this view, but this was published, I think, in something like Foreign Affairs. Okay? I'm not sure where it was published, but I think it was published. And Dean Rusk is saying, we can't win in Vietnam, but we've got to stay there. Why? We're dealing with a maniac. He doesn't use the term maniac, but he might as well have, in Mao Zedong. We know what happened. I don't think he says this, but understands anything, knows.
Yeah, Mao Zedong was crazy.
He was crazy. And he was saying we can't, although I don't think he said it in as many words, we know what he'll do if we start winning in Vietnam.
Mao Zedong was the Lord of the Flies.
Oh, he was awful. He was just an absolute crazed maniac. So what happened when they were going to flush the commies out of North Vietnam, the local yokels, Mao Zedong invaded. And it was almost like World War III, like Americans fighting against the Chinese. The Americans were able to contain it and stuff like that. They didn't want to risk that again in Vietnam. And so Rusk realizes this. He says, what we've got to do is we've got to last this guy out. So the Americans failed in the Ruskian mission because when did Mao die? 76. When did the Americans lose the war in Vietnam? 75. Yeah, they were off by 1 year. But you see, what they did was they got the commies involved in a quagmire. That's what Rusk is talking about. He's saying we've just got to keep them from taking over until Mao dies. And guess what? Mission basically accomplished. By 75, he was a relatively spent force. 1 more year to live. I think he was into his 80s. Incidentally, in terms of him being crazy, Pauline's already talked with Mao, and not Dean Rusk, much less John F. Kennedy, about him trying to get people to whack all the birds in China. And then all of a sudden they're having troubles with crops because insects are going nuts. What a stupid fool. No, he's worse than a fool. He's crazy. So here's his doctor. Maybe the doctor defected. He's in the United States now. But he was a doctor during his doctor during this time period. I believe it was something between 55 and when he died. So about 20 years. And he said that he doesn't mention any diagnosis. He's a doctor of his body, right? Not of his mind. But we can do a pretty good analysis. Okay? So he says that when Mao was feeling down, he could sleep for weeks on end. Uh-oh. That looks as though he's subject to bouts of depression. And then he goes on to say, when he got an idée fixe, an obsession, a certain idea, he couldn't go to sleep. And his doctor would know about it because I suspect he was giving him, the doctor doesn't mention it, at least in that passage, having to give him sleeping pills. Potions to put this guy to sleep. So that's when it triggered. People can get down, sleep a lot, depression. That didn't strike me as being like Mao. Oh, not getting to sleep. When people can't get to sleep, what that triggers is when they don't get enough sleep, they're having a Patty Duke, just one bout of a steroid, and she couldn't go to sleep, And after one day, she was off. That had triggered manic depression. That's the term used in the book describing it. I think it was Ghosts Written For or something like that. It's definitely a biography, maybe an autobiography. And so Mao, I mean, apparently, according to his doctor, this would be ideas, plural. So, yeah, in today's terms, bipolar. And that's psychosis. Okay? Now, in terms of what Kennedy had to deal with, yeah, it looked as though Dr. Feelgood, as he was called back in the day, a guy called Max Jacobson, who was, I don't know if he was the doctor to the stars, but he's apparently giving some of his potions to Kennedy. I don't know if Kennedy realized exactly what he was getting, but he was getting amphetamines, doses of amphetamines, I guess. So, of course, Silas Smersh is retrojecting what we know about it. Back then. They were feeding guys like Elvis going on army missions.
Right.
They were giving them amphetamines. They didn't realize, I think, that they were addictive and how.
You can have my avocado.
Okay, good.
I put avocado on it this time because we had it.
So
I didn't want it.
he keeps on retrojecting, latter day values back into the early 60s and early. For example, it looks as though dude had chlamydia. Kind of. Okay. He had chlamydia, but we didn't realize that it was, I don't think it got its name until about the late 80s or something like that. They didn't realize that it could cause.
You want to stab
infertility
one of these?
in women. Sure, you bet. Sure, it doesn't drop.
It won't.
Infertility in women. That wasn't discovered until later. So he's going around thinking that he's got a mild, as the term was then, a venereal disease. No, he's taken a lot of. Well, he couldn't take penicillin. I think he developed a resistance to it, but various sorts of antibiotics. But Khrushchev, here's a CIA assessment of Khrushchev. I suspect it's the real thing and not latter-day disinformation. Why? Because they would have said manic depressive. They would have gone over the top. Their assessment of Khrushchev, hypomanic, which is low yield. Manic depressive, tending more towards elation and depression, although it's said that Khrushchev, when he had power taken away from him, spent maybe days crying. So, anyway, elation. Khrushchev had similar ideas. The Virgin Lands Project, the project to plant lots of corn in Russia. Yeah, you can grow corn in the Ukraine. But he visited Iowa and he thought he could grow corn and I presume pigs. Maybe because he looked in the mirror too. Hey, we can grow pigs because I look like one. So Khrushchev was a horrible brute. Now understand, Mao Zedong, here's the bottom line about craziness. This guy is skeptical when he says the American, Kennedy was saying, Mao Zedong doesn't care. I mean, he wants to initiate a nuclear war. Oh, that's that's Kennedy making things up. Okay, Khrushchev remembers 7 years after Kennedy dies. Khrushchev remembers. Here's what he remembers. He's together with Mao, and Mao just says out of the blue, the red, "Hey, let's start World War III." And here's what Khrushchev's question to that was, are you crazy? That's a rhetorical question, incidentally. He's saying, you are crazy, you stupid coot. And when I read that way back about 1973, I'm going, wow, can I trust Khrushchev? But his doctor, that's Mao's doctor, not Khrushchev's doctor, was saying this was a constant theme with Mao. We're going to start World War III and we're going to win it. Because that was Mao's response to Khrushchev. when Khrushchev said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "No, we'll win." That's crazy. The guy was just flipping crazy, and Khrushchev, who was borderline crazy, hypomanic, he at least, that's how crazy Mao was. You could see how crazy Mao was. So, wow, that's what Kennedy had to deal with. And when you look, you see what happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis. You read Khrushchev and his reaction to Kennedy. You read about it. And he was saying, he's just a spoiled little, weak little, rich kid. And what he was doing was he's push, 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 push. If it hadn't been the Cuban Missile Crisis, it would have been something else, and it would have been something worse. He kept on pushing harder and harder and harder, and finally, I know you Fogoshes don't like this term, or you actually like using it, push back. Khrushchev got pushed back, and he found out. Now, you know, like, according to Cecil Smersh, the Russians had to get rid of Khrushchev because Kennedy had exposed him as having no cojones. No. I think the people in Russia were a little more responsible. You know, like, I don't know, I don't have any documentation on it, but I'm assuming that they're kind of rational. And they were looking at Khrushchev and saying, "You pushed us to the brink of World War III? You stupid, stupid moron. You are gone. You are gone." So Silas Hirsch isn't putting the worst interpretation on it. Oh, Khrushchev or Kennedy stripped Khrushchev of his masculinity and he had to be gotten rid of by the Russians. My interpretation is the Russians were actually semi-sane, and they were saying, this guy, Khrushchev, drove us to the brink of World War III, and apparently he'd given not just his general in Cuba the ability to launch on the United States, but the Cubans to launch on the United States. I don't get that from Silas here. But according to Silas, his general, the ability to launch. You know, like, here's his interpretation of Kennedy. He's asking, if we launch a missile, is there any way of us bringing it back? And what was Silas Hirsch's, or Silas Smersh's interpretation of that? Are we out?
No,
We're still going.
We still have a couple minutes.
I think it was something like, I'll have to check it up. We don't, you know, like, he wanted to make sure that if he launched that it would keep going. There was no way of bringing. No, Kennedy's he seems like a fairly rational individual. He negotiated, you know, the missiles getting out of there. He gave up missiles in Turkey. You know, it's just, you know, like, you know, like if we launch, we better make sure that we've got made the decision. We can't change our minds or anything like that afterwards. So he's always putting the worst, you know, like, here's the thing, you know, like with the Bay of Pigs, he's rash going into the Bay of Pigs, and then when he doesn't send in the second wave of bombers, which everyone's recommending, all his military and stuff like that is recommending he do, the second wave of bombers, he's indecisive. You can't have it both ways, you stupid moron. Rash and indecisive. But that's what he's always like. He's like an opposition leader in